You. The lighting might be a little bit hectic there. I may need to move things around a bit. I do apologize. Let me get in the way of that a bit. Shit. Maybe I just need to shift my whole thing around a bit. Wow. That's gonna be weird. Such an important topic. You'd hope I'd be good to go. Hey there. Hey Oddity. Hi bro. Nice to catch you. I guess it's early morning where you're at. I'm eager to start chatting to my chat room, or the chat room that forms up sometimes around this, and I will do in good time. I'll probably have to wear my glasses for that, because it is a bit of a strain to see the small print. Today is the 11th of November 2018, and just a few minutes ago it was the 11th hour, or the 11th minute of the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month, and all that numerological programming that has been offered to us, or given to us rather, by the authorities that we hold so dear. In England, where I live now for the last 24 years, I was born in England, but my parents raised me in South Africa, so I kind of took on the South African identity, South African flag of the day, and the South African national anthem. But in the time that I've been in the UK, I have seen or maybe been paying more attention, but seen the growth of the awareness of the veterans' plight in the modern era. It had perhaps slipped from the consciousness from the Generation X children, because a lot of them had no contact with combat or people that had died in combat. So when I came here, my peers, I came here first in 1988, directly after the war in Angola, and I realized that people weren't interested in that war, and young people weren't interested in military things, and I was unique back then. No one really came across people who'd had actual combat experience. Nowadays that's more commonplace, but back then it wasn't. And I think what has changed is the hey Tommy, I try not to get too caught up with that, I have noticed how Remembrance Day has become a more important day on the calendar in the United Kingdom. It's worth noting at this point that it's also a divisive day, particularly to people who feel that this is simply empire expressing itself, and there are a lot of people who are angry with empire. I confess that for many years here, when I came back to the UK in 1994, my wife and I have lived here since then anyway, there was the Remembrance Sunday thing, and I noticed the poppy thing, but I never really wanted to participate in it because I'd never really been that keen on war anyway, and my own experience of war had left me in no doubt that we shouldn't be killing each other. Although I acknowledge that I accepted that in the world we live, there are these bad people who do bad things, and sometimes those bad things need accounting for, and those people maybe need removing. Although obviously we live in a world in which people like Robert Mugabe can do whatever they like, and Gaddafi can do whatever they like up until a point. Pol Pot and Castro and whoever, all the bad boys that you want to name, Pinochet, General Augusto Pinochet, who the British took as shelter, after his awful crimes. Now, I therefore, and I also didn't think that people cared at all that we'd been in a war in Angola, and that had been completely just brushed under the carpet of history, which begs the question about how much other stuff gets brushed under the carpet of history. But I felt a sense of resentment. And then some of you may have heard me say up and previously that my mother's dying in 2011, her illness of a rapid death in 7 months of motor neuron disease had kind of taken me back into war, and the consequence of that, one of the consequences of that was that I went ahead and started writing about my experience at war, and that ended up being this book, Battle on the Lomba, 1987. Actually, one of the original names, the original name that I suggested to the publisher was, they called me Trinity. That was the original name, because that was a nickname I was given back in the army, Trinity. And, I got nothing to hide. That's me. And by the way, those things are what's called a post-nominal award for bravery. And it's this medal on the brown one nearest to the book is called a military merit, and that is a very special thing that 2 or 3 guys got. In my unit, I think more should have got that, to be honest. But in my squadron, more should have got that for being brave. However, I'm not trying to aggrandize those. I'm just stating facts. I didn't know about those medals until I wrote the book. When I started writing the book, people said, "Hey, why don't you apply for your medals from 30 years ago?" Because I'd never gotten any medals or anything like that. So I went ahead and did that. I went ahead and joined a South African Legion in London, a new group. They approached me and said, "We're setting ourselves up. Would you like to come and join us?" And so I went along, not so that I was that into becoming like a flag waving patriot or anything, because I'd fallen out of love with the system anyway. I mean, in South Africa, we'd been propagandized into supporting a racist government, and they had been replaced by another racist government. So just a change of colors, now instead of being so much of the reds and the blues from our imperial heritage, it's more of the greens and the yellows of the more sort of communist leaning flavor. So I went along and got drawn into, and really took some pleasure from, I'll be honest, getting involved in some veteran events. I even did a little bit of tin rattling to raise some money for the poppy appeal one year. A number of highlights include, marching a troop, a squadron of veterans along Buckingham Palace. And before the next year, then, marching past the Queen. Oh, and also giving this book to Harry, the Prince, at an event. Not him directly, but I was too kind of, I suppose, overawed by the experience to call out. It was in a public space, but I did make it enough of a noise or distraction to catch his attention, and he sent his equerry over to take the book from me, and I later got a letter from his office thanking me for the book. I wrote him back and said, "Oh, well, can you ask me how Harry got on with the book?" I was obviously taking the mick, because I knew, he gets a load of stuff passed to him, and, well, why is he going to read my book? And if he is, why is he going to bother telling me about it? But the point is that I wouldn't want to say I was like totally, caught up with it all, but I'm certainly aware that there is a sacrifice that has been made by millions over the years, and that sacrifice isn't one of choosing sides. I went to some lengths to engage with current officers of the South African military who were, I guess, would be termed former enemies. I met up with others who were of the terrorist organizations of the time. Christopher Cantiwe is an example of a man who, we've hugged and as brothers, and realized that we were all caught up in a system of propaganda that had us at each other's throats. I mean, still then I didn't realize the coordinated effort of it. But about a year after publishing my book, a guy came to me and said he knew people that, I know this is secondhand information, but once you've done the research into other machinations of state, you realize that what he says has a lot of weight. And that is that the Americans, okay, so I know for a fact, because I was on the ground in combat, that the American CIA were on the ground with the rebels that we were supporting. The rebels called UNITA, and they were run by a guy called Jonas Savimbi, who I now think would have been a CIA guy, well looked after by them, and he was provided with weaponry by them, as well as on the ground support from the CIA agents that we saw carrying Stinger missiles, anti-aircraft missiles. They were like high-tech gear, ahead of anything that we had. And that was 1987. Plenty of people will talk about that. Pilots who had to wait for CIA flights to leave the local airstrip, stuff like that, So it was a matter of fact. But it turns out that these guys were all meeting in a hotel room in Angola, in Luanda, to strategize about what plays would be made, and that even though this battle here was a real thing, and the battle on the Lomba, I describe it a single day, although we were at my squadron, and this is a lot of us on this tank here, Russian tank, we were up there 3 months in combat for quite a lot of that time. On one day we wiped out an entire brigade, or rather it was removed from military it ceased to exist because of one intense day of battle. I was just, by the way, this is a model of the vehicle that I was commander of. Someone very kindly sent me this, and it's a 20-ton fighting vehicle. It can carry up to 11 people, guys in the back here. But the crew, for me, I had no one in the back, just the driver and the gunner and myself. And then there's 4 of us in a troop of these, and 12 in total in a squadron. And we, with the support of 61 Mechanized Battalion, which was the unit that I was part of, we went into combat on one day and took out this brigade called the 47th Brigade. I'll read what it says on the book here. This is on the back of my book, by Major General Roland de Vries, who was at one point second in command of the army. I think that's what it says. My former deputy chief of the South African Army. It says, let's go into action with Charlie Squadron, living on the edge. Rattle 90s against Russian T-55 tanks. Few against many. A captivating read with beautiful twists and turns, without once losing the thread. A story most profound of life in the military. We were actually forced to go by law. All white boys had to give up 2 years to national service. Sometimes it was, depending on the period in history you're looking at, sometimes it was 18 months and maybe even down to as little as 12 months. But in my case, it was 2 years plus an additional 2 years spread out over the rest of your adulthood or something. So, as told by a young South African national serviceman who served during the South African Border War, David Mannell gives a vivid account of one of the fiercest mechanized battles of contemporary warfare in Africa, which was fought in southeast Angola. The Battle of the Lomba on 3rd of October 1980. And when people died and die around you, I mean, the thing is, people die every day, unfortunately, of cruel and violent things. So, just because I happen to be involved in them doesn't make them more or less significant deaths than any other. It's worth saying that. I hope my audio is not too bad. I've got the washing machine spinning some stuff there. This was the battle which turned the deliberate onslaught of overwhelming Angolan Cuban conventional coalition force at the height of the Cold War, and sent the enemy reeling. Our young national servicemen were warriors for dauntless service rendered by men such as 19-year-old David Mannell. One can only feel and express gratefulness. Their combined best proved good enough. This is Major General Roland de Vries. Now, that's a very one-sided sort of thing, isn't it, really? When you look at it from the perspective of the entire construct is designed to keep people in a low vibrational state of fear. And it worked in the case of South Africa. And interestingly, and this is why the veterans movements and Remembrance Day and Poppy Day and so on is so important as part of the ongoing propaganda, is that it reinforces the threat of bad people and bad things happening. It reinforces the need for governors and government to provide you with the protection from these despots who oftentimes have been trained, armed, funded, even coerced by the very government that you're seeking to protect you from this, or the ones that you're saying thanks for, arranging for us to have a poppy day of remembrance to remember the dead and wounded who you created through the wars that you and your banker buddies manufactured. So, we've got to move beyond being so emotionally drawn or torn by the reality, the horror of the wars, as that being the sort of the excuse or the rationale for not facing up to this reality. And the thing is that when I wrote this book, I'm on this tank somewhere, I won't bother pointing that out, and this little patch here is a surviving piece of one of these got blown up a few days after this battle by some MiG planes. We were attacked. I write about it in the book, and one of the few things that I just happened to have that when I lost my thread. You see, when they say, hey, you've got to remember your dead, these guys I think Adrian is on here. One of these guys on here doesn't survive much more than a few days after this photo is taken. Adrian Hind dies at the battle on the 3rd of October. He was a lieutenant, young man. So when I wrote this book, I was seen as something of a hero, actually. And then obviously to get this medal here really cemented that credential. It was like, wow, I had been told that I was going to be awarded some state's president award for bravery or something, but I never heard of that until 4 or 5 years ago when I got through the process of writing this book. And so I was, for a short time, someone that was fated by the people, you know. And the guy who writes on the back there, very well-respected general, you know, and I got invited to speak at, you know, one of the most high-profile units at their annual event in South Africa, you know, in 2015. And I guess I had to go back to have that DMT experience I talk about, but I went back to South Africa, and yeah, you know, people like couldn't wait to buy me a beer and so on. But that's because I was going along with it and being on their team. Now you say that, hey, what if you choose a team, we all lose. So essentially, you're creating this problem, or people like us who stick to the flags. There's one. I got called up to 2 Special Services Battalion as part of my national service, and that's one Special Services Battalion. They're the armoured car unit, and the armoured car had been morphed into this beast called the Rattle, which is, in English, would be the it'll come to me. Honey badger. The honey badger. I think it's right. Which is a pretty ferocious animal. Anyway, this is a 90mm cannon, so it might be difficult for you to get a sense of the size of it. So fortunately, I saved a shell casing from a battle in Angola, and I have it here. This is it, and as you can see, it's quite a large shell casing, and it weighs. It's got quite a heft to it. I guess it's about 5 or 6 kilos. And then, you know, it would obviously have a projectile at the front of that, which once you ram it into the old breech of that gun, it requires only for the gunner to line up the sights on the target and push the little button for the bomb to release, and yeah. You see, this is not about dishonoring anyone who's been to war and any loss that you've suffered from war, whether it be on the blue side or the red side. This is about saying that we are all one, but all within the same, coming under the same game owner kind of propaganda soup. You know, and so many of us will want to cling to that soup. And I guess, well, I lost my track when I was saying that, you know, I went from being like a hero to a zero in a very short space of time when I started saying that the government was the problem, and that we are actually far more sovereign, divine, and significant than this system would allow you to think. And for that reason, the business of war is much more than just about breaking bodies, maybe reducing population, creating profit-driven industries like the armaments industry and clothing, and army as a military is a very big income generator, but it's not about those things. It's simply part of the dialectic to keep us all distracted and dismembered, keep us apart from each other, give us reasons to think that lot over there are our problem. But you take these men and these women and you put them in a forest and you ask them to do what comes naturally, and they will find a way to coexist and work together to share energy, to share ideas, to flourish. And the poppy that I once wore and I once gathered charity for is a symbol of the continuation of the cycle of death and control that our masters want to perpetuate. So I'm offering as my sincere veteran perspective. I'm a 50-year-old guy, so I have had plenty of time to think about all of this. But think about it like this: if this is troubling you, it can only be because there's a set of propaganda that you hold dear that says that your group, your ethnic group, your religious group, your national group, that's a big one, isn't it? Everybody has this sort of national identity now impregnated, is so significant as an identifier of you and a separator of you from almost every other group. Unless your masters tell you otherwise, you treat them as though they're a pariah. And that's not you thinking for yourself. That's somebody else instructing you. That's not you listening to your heart. That's someone else in control of your mind. Government, the root of government is mind control. Govern the mental, govern the mind. Control the mind. And they do that. They pull at your heartstrings. Children die here, or older people die in this such a situation, and these are exploited. Or the situation is simply created as fake news. This is probably the majority of what people get in this day and age is fake news. But what is true and what is real is that, we are pure divine light beings, and we should be seeking greater ways to harmonize than to continue this, I don't know if it's Darwinian, but certainly, it has its, if you look at the control structure of the day, and you can see exactly who has their hands all over the system of control. And for now, I'm resolved to the realization that the majority are totally entranced by the jewelry, all the glitz and the baubles. I got quite a few other sort of little bits of medallion and whatnot, and badges, and that symbolize certain things, and people, in the know, they'll, you got one of those, eh? So it's all, it's all kind of exclusive, and it's all, yeah, it's all separationist. Talk out against it, and people will just want to like boot you out of the club anyway. I went to what would would it have been, end of 2016? I went to I didn't want to go along to the march on Remembrance Sunday, but I was willing to go and try and have a beer with the guys, because back in the day that would have been backslapping. How are you doing? But oh my God, I made the room go very cold when I arrived, and I didn't stay long. I didn't feel comfortable at all. That's okay, because these guys are entranced, and it'll take some time for that to change. But it doesn't mean that I can't find a way to share these thoughts and get people starting to think, or encourage other thinkers to think about how these things we revere are given to us by a system that encourages division, that encourages the red and blue, the communist, capitalist, yin yang, Muslim, Christian, rich, poor. That's one that I don't talk enough on. The rich-poor dialectic is just another way of getting one group to think that another group have got it in for them. Anyway, my older boy has come to join me for a chat, so I'm going to rock and roll. I hope that's been useful, and I will look forward to talking to you again sometime soon. Bye, guys. Oh, before I go, I should maybe just say hello and thanks for stopping by. Good talk, Dave. Thanks, Michael. Yeah, is that Marilyn Wisby? Hi, Marilyn. Oh, I should stop and say hi. Make love, not war. No more wars, please. Marilyn, how nice for you to be here. I hope, Lukey, I hope you don't mind. I'm just going to continue this chat a little longer. I said earlier, I want to start using my chat room as a place to maybe even have some conversations with folks and stuff. So, Marilyn Wisby, it was nice to meet you recently, and it's very cool that Cat and I, Cosmic Cat, I should say, and I are, and Andrea, are going to be hosting a gathering of folks in Greenwich at the end of this month, on the last Thursday of November, and at a very cool pub. Actually, we've gotten a very cool venue, and we're not charging for entrance, and we are going to give people a complimentary glass, hopefully more than one, but a complimentary glass of chilled distilled water. And I'm going to do a talk on distilled water, in fact. And I think, I haven't got it confirmed yet, but I think that we will have another speaker who we're going to invite to do like a 10 or 12 minute talk on a topic yet to be confirmed. So, and this would be, the idea would be to do something on a monthly basis and see where we go. Not make it like, flat out flatness, about just hammering flatness and flat smacking and so on. That's not a term that I even care to use, really. I might have used it once or twice, but I don't really care for that approach. It sounds a little bit too kind of, second-hand car salesman. For me, it's more about bringing people on side, but not playing into the system's way of saying, "Oh yeah, the Earth is flat, you fools." It's how can you not know that? Because it doesn't really reach people in the same way that connecting with them on how the finance system is rigged, and how the pharmaceutical industry is causing a lot more problems than it is curing. So, and distilled water, I mean, another thing that we could be doing to raise our awareness, or our consciousness, or our health and our well-being, and a whole raft of other things. So it's really exciting that we can start to talk about things other than flat Earth. It's almost like, let's park flat Earth. We'll obviously want to talk about it, because without knowing that you live on a flat Earth, you can never really know the truth of whatever subject you're an expert at. That's my view. I think you need to know that, but you don't need to smack everybody over the face with first as they walk through the door. And so our approach is going to be to maybe talk on it, around it, without kind of hammering it from the off. That's very exciting, and I know there's other people getting involved in other projects, which is fantastic. Oh, Lukey, would you grab the door? And yeah, so that's cool. And Marilyn, it made me think about your experience of living with some, or having as friends in your life, and people in your life or who are sort of outside of the system. If you're listening to this and you don't know who Marilyn Wisby is, she, I hope you don't mind me saying this, was married to one of the great train robbers. She wrote a book about it, and called Gangster's Mole. I hope I got that all right. And that's fantastic as an experience. But I was thinking about how these guys, these gangsters, or this great train robbery is such a folklore story, and so important, you would think, for a system that likes to encourage the need for police and so on. Actually, I'm not saying that the robbery never happened. I'm sure that it did, and I'm sure that these guys came away with a wedge. But the system knows it needs people like this, almost. There is a kind of pressure release that people can go to for, yeah, we do have crime and we need this, or even that, there are people who can kind of take the system down, and, it's not all bad for us, I mean, some people say that the ruling families are really the mafia, the world, the Illuminati, or the whatever that runs this show. Some people would suggest that there's 13 families, and they're perhaps mostly Italian families, but how would I know? But it is if you think about how the Vatican works and how governments work, as I say that they're like a syndicate or a franchise system, then they want to have they want to have gangsters. They want gangsters. They want the local crime. They want the bigger crime, and then they'll probably have their hands in the pie of it. And then the international level crime, they'll be orchestrating and calling it global trade. So, I think that for these folks, even though they may be some of the most outside of the system, so-called outside of the system, they will be also some of the most eager to cling to their notions of this materialist reality, the one that our science teacher impregnated, one of the most important people in your life, your science teacher. So I think there's maybe a few more comments. I should say hi to one or two more people before I call it? That is it Tommy saying resonated? I can't read that very well. Sorry, man, my eyesight. Yeah, it's bigger than. Okay. Yeah. Does that say red herring medium? I got it wrong. I do apologize. I should get glasses on. So yeah, it's bigger than flat Earth, but flat Earth is like the Earth being. I like to think of it like this. For what it's worth, guys, this is what I think of now because I see how flat Earth is triggering people, and I find it hard, to be honest with you, to stand in front of people and trigger them in such a way. That doesn't come naturally to me. Like, as I was explaining earlier on, I spent many hours in one of these, moving backwards and forwards and finding targets and shooting on them, right? So I've done that. But that's not really how we should be being with each other. And the flat Earth somehow, while we can see what we mean by a flat Earth, we don't mean just like it's just a table flat and it's like so thin like this, some kind of disc or a frisbee. We realize that it's got to be a sort of upside down frisbee at the very least with containment for the water. We recognize that, I think. But you see, the whole thing that we live in is probably an oblate electromagnetic field, like a torus. So it's not really that accurate to call it a flat Earth, in my opinion. You're much better off. Well, I don't know what you're better off saying, but I'm just trying to find as a form of words that is more appropriate, and also a form of approach that is less antagonistic. Because the flat slapping thing is, fine for some people, but it's not really my thing. I think I have to find a more loving way to talk to my fellow brother and sister, and that is by bringing them other information about who and what we are, but then, of course, pulling them onto the stationary, immovable plane. It does help, to get your senses right. So, I hope I don't have to run out of battery here, but... that was that. Someone asked me a little while ago here if I'd spoken to Harry and Jason, and yeah, I haven't spoken to Jason. I have spoken to Harry, and I think he's enjoying the slightly quieter life, although he's looking forward to working on other projects. So I'm sure he'll come. I'm sure he'll come up with and talk about that more in the coming days. Flat Earth is a loaded term, yeah. Let me read that out. The Flat Earth Society, yeah, because the flat and the mainstream media portray the topic. Yeah, but it's also that when we think about the Earth as a ball, we think in terms of atomic. The reason that the ball works in space is because of how atoms work and how you've got electrons and protons in a lot of space around them, and things are just flying around and so on. And so when you move to a flat Earth, you keep all of that. Things are floating around in space, and they're doing all of this rather than actually having to set aside the materialist particle physics and saying that actually it is its wave electromagnetic physics that we should be understanding. Electromagnetism and how things work in an electromagnetic field, how light works, how the sun might be working and tracking on an electromagnetic turning torus field. And so that means that there is a roundness, or there is there's a roof and probably a below, as above so below. So I think that there's probably all of that, yeah. And we're just kind of on the plane, where where there's water, we can't go so easily, and where there's land, we sticking out above the water, we can travel. Is it round? Is it an infinite plane? I don't know, but I I, I think it's more about trying to move people on from thinking of themselves as Darwinian beasts that have just learned to speak and stopped drooling a few thousand years ago. We know that's bullshit. If you look into the mud flood and you look into the true possible ages of things, then you know that all of our history is bunked. So anyway, I do have a family looking to come into the kitchen now, and I have actually started to enjoy that there is a whole bunch of good people come in and listen here, and I want to grow that, talk to other people, bring other people along, and be a part of something that is looking to move us on from our early mind state, where it comes to being just good people looking to share the truth about who and what we are. So the London event that Kat and I and my wife are setting up for the end of November, for the 29th of November, is, as I said, at Greenwich, which is where Greenwich Mean Time comes from. So it's a perfect place. Awesome pub called the Vanborough, and I'll be putting more details out on that. We're going to kick it off at 7 o'clock and just have like half an hour of talking in a Q&A session, and then more generally just allow people to kind of mingle, drink some distilled water, and make friends, and be involved in something that feels a little more family, or a little bit more human, like something loving, to be part of something that's caring about how we can look after ourselves, take care of ourselves a whole lot better, learn more about who and what we truly are, come together with other thinkers who have started to reset their expertise on a level plane, or a level playing field. So that's what's coming up. Did I say the 29th of November, 7 p.m. At the Vanborough, and I will put out more details in the next few weeks. And it's just invite some friends, and let's get some people together in a completely unthreatening kind of environment. Speaker's Corner, for example, is quite an intimidating sort of environment. We're trying to create something a lot softer, something a lot more kind on the heart and on the mind. So with that, I will say have a super Sunday, and I look forward to catching up soon.